You can't even tell the real story of America without including the incredible diverse heroes of American history that today we largely don't know about. And here's what's so interesting historically, is we actually can track historically to why we don't know them today. Because we can back up to a guy like this. William Nell was a black historian, and he was a black historian in the early 1800s, in the middle of the abolition movement, when there were some Americans who were arguing that blacks were not equal to whites, and obviously many abolitionists were going, guys, you're crazy. Well, this black historian went back just to the American Revolution. This book is called Colored Patriots in the American Revolution. He listed more than 100 black heroes of the Revolution, and the point he made was, we wouldn't have even won the Revolution if it wasn't for these black patriots and black heroes along the way, which was totally true. This was very well known in American history. In fact, if you look at the Civil War, you have the Mass 54th, you have the Mass 55th, you have the Rhode Island Regiment, you have so many black heroes of the Civil War, and a lot of context for that too. You have Frederick Douglass, who's obviously a major abolition leader and movement and what's happening. He was photographed more times than anybody else in the 1800s. He was photographed more than Abraham Lincoln. Why all this matters is all of it changed when this came out. We actually have the other volumes in the vault. That is one of a 5-volume set of American history done by Woodrow Wilson. If you don't know Woodrow Wilson, you should dislike Woodrow Wilson. Let's start there, right? Arguably worst president in American history, but the dude was also pretty evil and racist in what he did. He was definitely one of the most, if not the most racist president in American history. Under Woodrow Wilson's administration, you had the rebirth of the KKK. Woodrow Wilson showed the very first ever film at the White House was Birth of a Nation. There were 2 viewings of it at the White House. And in the midst of this, his administration marched openly with the KKK in Washington, D.C. Dude's a terrible racist. Let's back up. 1902, he was a professor. He wrote a 5-volume set of American history, starting from the beginning up to present time. And this was so popular, it actually promoted him in notoriety. He became the president of Princeton and the president of the United States. Let's back up to the book. In this book, he removed every single black person from American history. Now, not like hero, every black person. There's no mention of Frederick Douglass, Booker T. Washington, George Washington Carver, not of James Armistead, not of Crispus Attucks. Like literally no black person is mentioned in American history. And what's interesting is in this book, he actually does point out that black people do exist, but he says they are not fully evolved like the white man. And then he shows pictures of them. Open up just where that little sticky note is. He shows pictures of what black people look like, and the picture he shows is like something on the Neanderthal scale, is what he shows. Now, this is incredibly racist, but let me connect the dots for you. You know what Woodrow Wilson was doing? He was following the science. In Charles Darwin's original book, Origin of Species, it wasn't just origin of species by means of natural selection. There actually is a subtitle to it. And the subtitle underneath it, it says, or the preservation of favored races in the struggle for life. Favored races? Struggle for life? Darwin, after he did this book, he spends more time in this book dealing with animals and plants. He does mention people in this. He says, but I'm going to come back to that later. So he then comes out with a 2-volume set called The Descent of Man, where the 2-volume set several years later came out. He articulated very strongly, the darker your skin, the less evolved you are. The lighter your skin, the more evolved you are. He was in favor of colonization, of sending all dark people off continent back over to Africa until they had evolved fully and were light enough to come back to America. Now, let me just point out, the last 2 years, people have been tearing down all kinds of statues claiming they were racist. I would just like to know how in the world Charles Darwin's still a prominent thought in our schools today if we're having to remove all these racists. Just curious, but right, Woodrow Wilson's just following the science. Here's what's important. Woodrow Wilson's 4 or 5-volume history set, in the progressive era coming in, when progressives took over education, they used his 5-volume history set as the basis standard for all curriculum done in American history. And that's why even in February, Black History Month, most people learn about like 5 black heroes in American history. The reality is America has way more than 5 black heroes. America has hundreds of black heroes. The problem is that when racists rewrite the story, it makes the story look very different than what actually happened. And here's where I also would point out, we are seeing a lot of division and discontent in America. And it's not super surprising if the only thing you have told black people for 100+ years is that you're not the same value, is that you were oppressed. The only history you know is you were enslaved until MLK came along. Like, that's the only history you know. I understand why you feel disenfranchised without recognizing there would not be an America had it not been for the black heroes of the revolution. Right? Like, there's a lot more to this story and conversation. And let me go even further. This is the 1936 Olympic torch from Berlin. Correct. In 1936, this is when Hitler at the Olympics wants to show the superiority of the Aryan race. And in the midst of that, right here, there are two pieces of paper that are signatures from the Olympic winners in track and field. Right here at the top of this page is the signature of a gentleman named Jesse Owens. Jesse Owens was the black American patriot who was the absolute Aryan philosophy buster for what Hitler was trying to do when he showed up and he won 4 different gold medals, 4 different events he gold medaled in, right? Here's what's important to know. Jesse Owens, in the midst of those Olympics, you can go back and read his writings, I encourage you to. He said when he first took the stand after winning the first gold medal, he said the American flag was raised. He said the Star-Spangled Banner started to place and tears filled my eyes as I watched Old Glory be raised. It was the most glorious sight. It's just interesting that he talks so much about the flag in that Olympics, and he talked about how the flag was such a clear distinction of what it represented versus what Germany and Hitler and the Nazis were fighting for and what their position was and represented. I would point out that in America today, there are very few people paying attention to the Olympics. One of the reasons is of all of the wokeness of the athletes. One of the problems is we have forgotten what the American flag even stands for. But if you back up, if you remember back in the 1970s, there was the black power symbol from those Olympics. You know who was there at those Olympics and who was a trainer at those Olympics? Jesse Owens. You know what Jesse Owens did after that happened? He took those black athletes back into the training room and he sat them down for hours. And he talked to them, literally, you go back and read his writings. Like, he talks about this is in the records. He talked to them for hours and said, you've misunderstood what America is, what it stands for, what opportunities you have, and what that flag really means. We will never disrespect that flag again. One of the reasons America is so confused right now is we've forgotten so much of that history. If we actually knew the truth, the way you overcome lies is with the truth. We have to be people that are more interested in pursuing what is true than just following the science, than just listening to whatever the narrative might be. And I'm not anti-science, I'm just saying there's a lot of people faking what real science is with their agenda, right? That's what I'm really more pointing out. We want to be people promoting the truth, and one of the things we try to do at Wallbuilders and Mercury One is we try to help retell the story with actual documents and artifacts. In just a little bit, we'll open up. If you guys want to walk out and see some of these things in the next room, there's a lot of really cool special artifacts, things from presidents, things from military history, things from religious and Christian heritage of America. A lot of cool things. Again, we'd ask, please don't take any drinks, don't take food, please don't pick stuff up, but a lot of it's labeled, a lot of really cool stuff you can go see, go check out. I'll have some of this stuff up here in the corner spread out if you want to take pictures of it. But we need to be people who are not being led by emotion, not being led by trend, but people that are pursuing and being led by truth. Thank you guys so much. We'll turn it back.